This is Soundstage founder Doug Schneider. You're listening to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast, your semi-regular deep dive into news, facts, opinions, and anecdotes about everything that really matters in the world of high-performance audio. Hosts Brent Butterworth and Dennis Berger have more than 5 decades worth of audio product testing experience and a few hours of podcasting experience as well. Now, here's Brent and Dennis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dennis Berger, editor of Soundstage Access.
And I'm Brent Butterworth, editor of Soundstage Solo.
And we both write for the Soundstage Network, which is a collection of 9 microsites that cover all sorts of topics in audio, from the very, very high end to connected devices to headphones and everything between.
And this is the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast, where we talk about everything having to do with audio, at least everything that interests us.
Yeah, and everything that we think should interest you.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think I'm going to start off with a little bit of a controversial topic this week, because I want to talk about a new product out from McIntosh Labs called the LB200 Light Box. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by what this thing is and what it does, but we'll dig into that in a minute. What do you want to talk about, Brent?
I want to talk about your article that you recently did on Soundstage Access about why is vintage audio so hot right now. And we're going to pull in a very special guest, Gordon Sauck, who is the founder of Innovative Audio, one of the world's largest vintage audio dealers. And then what are we going to do?
I have seen you reviewing a lot of headphones or earphones recently on Soundstage Solo with a label that struck me as kind of curious. You've been referring to them as ChiFi, which is a term I heard from you. So I want to talk about these earphones and what ChiFi is and what it means and why you're paying so much attention to it.
And why they're so cheap.
Yeah.
And good. Kind of. Yeah, some of them. So.
Oh, hey, man. Spoiler warning.
Okay, cheap and good. Spoiler, cheap and good, but we can dig more into that.
Yeah.
Right, because nobody believes you if you say something's cheap and good.
That's right.
So, but there's a lot of good reasons why these are good.
Yeah. First things first, though, I want to dig into this new product announcement from McIntosh. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, and I would be amazed if anyone doesn't know, McIntosh is a revered audio brand with by the way, we should say they were founded in 1949. I looked that up. I know for sure. Anyway, McIntosh is a revered brand that I think a lot of people sort of in my circles are familiar with due to their involvement with Woodstock. They provided all of the amplification for Woodstock. They were very, very popular with the Grateful Dead.
For the wall of sound, right?
The wall of sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, they are a distinctive looking brand. They are very popular with audiophiles. A lot of reliance on a cool aesthetic that involves a backlit blue VU meter. It's really neat. But they've recently introduced a new product that I saw on social media called the LB200 Light Box.
Oh, what's it do?
Well, nothing. I thought this was a joke at first. I look at this post on Facebook, and it's I'll just read the post real quick. So the post reads, "Here's the LB200 exclamation point. It may not sound like a typical McIntosh, but it is a great companion for any empty slots in your precious racks. Enhance the look of your system with this light box that has built-in storage compartment to place components and help organize your setup. Learn more about the LB200 at McIntosh Labs.com/LB200. And you go to that site, and it is an empty case. It's an empty gear case with a big front panel that says McIntosh, handcrafted in the USA since 1949. It's got low voltage triggers that will basically turn on that lighting when any of your other gear turns on. And then it's got a compartment in the back, which McIntosh describes thusly: place unsightly components brackets streaming boxes, cable boxes, etc. Inside
and
the
all of
LB200.
those not branded McIntosh.
All of those not branded McIntosh.
Put your $300 phono pre in there so people won't realize you have a $300 phono pre.
To declutter and beautify your system. Proudly displays illuminated McIntosh logo and handcrafted in the USA since 1949 statement as a badge of honor, a must for every McIntosh owner.
Wow.
I think I almost think that maybe this is satire. That was my first instinct. My first instinct was, did I miss April Fool's Day? My second instinct was, they have to be mocking late stage capitalism. I don't know.
Well, I gotta say,
yeah.
And did we mention this thing's $1,500?
Oh, we did not. This thing is $1,500.
It's $1,500 for a box that does nothing, which, granted, I have to admire their honesty because there's a lot of high-end products that do nothing. But they don't say it does nothing. But
right.
Anyway, there's a lot of high-end products that effectively do nothing, but are claimed to do something. This doesn't claim to do anything. But I have to point out that the McIntosh logo, I mean, we've all seen, I think, McIntosh products, and they have, kind of that cool, green backlit logo. That's part of their whole branding. And it's cool. It's really kind of old school. It looks like 1960s. It's kind of cool. But this has the McIntosh logo. It is humongous. It's probably like, 8 or 9 or 10 inches long. And it's really kind of garish to me. And so it looks, wasn't this thing derived from some kind of a dealer display?
Yeah, I was curious why they were calling this thing the LB200. I was like, LB2, that sounds like a sequel. It turns out this is a sequel. This is a follow-up to a product that McIntosh released in 2018 called the LB100 Light Box. And the biggest distinction between the LB100 and the LB200 is you couldn't remove the rear panel on the LB100. It was just a sealed, it looked like a piece of equipment with, a Barbie butt, I guess you would say. Like, there were no connections. It was just a sealed box with ventilation for whatever reason and an illuminated front panel. But yeah, in digging further, it turns out that these were years ago made for McIntosh dealers as a display. Basically you'd sort of put this just to sort of say, hey, we sell McIntosh gear, and people started begging to buy them. And I guess McIntosh eventually relented and said, okay, fine, you can buy it for $1,500. And then they've since updated it with the removable rear panels, so you can shove unsightly gear in the back of it if you want it. If you want your Roku to look like a McIntosh amp for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, I got to point out a couple things here. First of all, I assume this thing is made in McIntosh's plant in Binghamton, New York, which is not cheap to produce stuff in. And, because in the kind of quantities that they would need, they would not want to farm this thing out, which costs a lot of money to farm stuff out. You have to have a minimum order quantity of, 1,000 with most things. That's probably not practical. And since they're already building chassis, why not just make one that looks like this? So, they have real American workers banging these things out, and I'm sure they're very sturdily built, like all McIntosh components are. So it's not like somebody's charging you $1,500 for an empty chassis you could buy for $100 off of Marketech.
Yeah, it does say on the back of it, handcrafted in USA with US and imported parts.
Yeah, so they do have, and we tend to overlook that a lot in the high-end audio, that the cost of the chassis on amplifiers is in many cases more than the cost of the components inside. So there's that. And second of all, I think this is basically a good idea that other manufacturers should copy. I would hope they do put some thought into it and really kind of come up with something nice. But so many of us have now little power supplies for things. We have little boxes that connect this thing to that thing. We have all sorts of little tiny sort of black box components that, I tend to shove them behind my equipment rack, or my equipment rack is about, the bottom shelf is about 2 or 3 inches off the ground. And so I shove a lot of stuff under there. And we have to do a lot of things to hide all of that ancillary gear that all hi-fi systems have nowadays. So I think, in a sense, this is a really cool idea. And for Parasound to do this would be also cool. And for lots of other high-end audio manufacturers, this is a pretty good idea. It's just that, man, if they had just brought that McIntosh logo down to like some reasonable size, this is supposed to sit in the window of a dealership and basically be a sign that says, "We have McIntosh." And I guess there's probably some McIntosh consumers out there that want a sign in their system that says, "I have McIntosh."
Man,
as if the McIntosh components weren't enough of that already.
Yeah. I got to tell you, those people are not on Instagram and Facebook, because McIntosh is getting savaged for this. I mean, just utterly savaged. The comments on Facebook alone are just, I mean, people are just, the pitchforks are out. People are outraged. There's one comment in particular that I'm pulling up. $1,500 for a box with light promoting their brands. Man, every sale made of this will make them, let's just say, tinkle their pants with laughter. I mean, people are angry. We would have to bleep like every other comment on the Facebook thread, and the Instagram thread is even worse. People are outraged. So,
well, that's what happens. They get outraged about us. They get outraged about everything. So I don't think that's such a big deal. I think there's a lot of people out there that are also, especially on social media platforms, that are outraged about high-end audio in general.
But this isn't even high-end audio.
Well, it's not audio, but it's high-end audio is not just about sound quality. It's also about visual appeal. It's also about brand. It's about tribalism, frankly. It's about a lot of sort of social things that have nothing to do with sound quality. It's also about sound quality, you hope, usually, sometimes not. But so I think a lot of people are just outraged about this when they can go buy perfectly fine, as we've discussed many times. You can go put together a very, very good system now for $1,000 or something, or you can go buy Sonos stuff that sounds pretty good, or what have you, and it gets the job done. And so this is really no different from, like a Rolls Royce. What are you really getting? You're getting a car
that drives. I mean, you could actually go pick up groceries in it.
Well, I know, but it doesn't work. The thing is, a Rolls Royce, especially nowadays, a Rolls Royce doesn't look all that different from anything else on the road. Back when they had the funky grills and all that stuff, it's like, ooh, Rolls Royce. But now they don't look all that different, and I'm sure they perform well, and I'm sure they have nice wood inside. I don't think I've ever been in one, but what are you really getting? You're getting the Rolls-Royce branding more than anything else. It's like, oh, I own a Rolls-Royce. And every McIntosh owner, although McIntosh has a very good reputation for quality, every McIntosh owner takes pride in the fact that they own McIntosh. So I think it's okay. If they'd have just shrunk the logo, we probably wouldn't have been I would have said, no, let's don't talk about this. But the fact that they didn't shrink the logo, and also they should have had a door. All right, every manufacturer who decides to do this, make the front panel fold down so that people can get into all their little stuff and push the buttons and switches on it, and make the back panel, have a door on it or something to where you can get in there and access all the connections and make it kind of functional. But
they have the ladder. The original model didn't, but the new one does. Yeah.
Right. So really make it something that's a functional cosmetic component to kind of dress up your system. That's a perfectly nice thing to do. And don't put a lot of effort into it, and don't charge a ton of money. Charge, whatever your normal markup is on it, just charge that.
I found a comment that I wholly agree with. Guy says, now slap a couple of large VU meters on the front and you might have something. I'm with him.
Sure.
I need more VU meters in my system.
Sure. And, it's not like it's hard for them to execute that at this point. I'm sure they have boxes and boxes and boxes of those things.
Hell, they make clocks that look like VU meters. I kind of want one, I'm ashamed to admit.
Okay, I think that's enough discussion about this empty box for right now.
I think so too. Yeah.
Let's move on. So in our next segment, we are going to discuss vintage audio with vintage audio expert Gordon Sauck.
I'm going to
We'll be
learn
right
some
back.
stuff. Yeah.
And we're back. I'm Brent Butterworth.
And I'm Dennis Berger.
And this is the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. And Dennis, we in this segment are going to discuss an article that you wrote, which is called Why is Vintage Audio So Hot Right Now? And this is on soundstageaccess.com. You can go check it out right now if you like, or wait till the end of the podcast. And right now, though, we have a very special guest who can actually, unlike you and I, talk with some authority about vintage audio. His name is Gordon Sauck. He is the founder of Innovative Audio, and that is one of the largest vintage audio dealers in the world. Gordon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very, very glad to be here.
We're very glad to have you, Gordon. I have to admit, I wished I had had time to interview you for this story. I did not, for various reasons that I want to get into here. So when I was writing this piece, I kind of had to go off in my own direction because I really don't, as Brent said, I don't have any authority on vintage audio. So I had to sort of wrap my brain around why I think there seems to be some noteworthy increased interest as of late in vintage audio, which goes beyond the sort of trend that we've seen over the past few decades. So, yeah, I wish I could have interviewed you, but I didn't have time. So now is my chance to make up for that and correct the record for a bit. Did you have a chance to read the article?
I didn't. Yes, I did.
So what did I get wrong?
Really nothing. For the most part, it was you kind of more highlighted than you did anything else. You really didn't go in depth, but with regards to that, we've noticed, especially in the last 15 years or so, that the whole basic aspect of vintage audio itself has maintained a very high level. We're finding that it's a question of, most people say it's the sound, but realistically, it's the old aesthetics. It's like getting an old Mustang or an old Corvette. It's just, people just find that it's much better. But yes, if you have questions, by all means, please fire them at me.
The thing is, though, if you look at the online domain, Reddit, I'm a big Redditor, and look at a subreddit like r/vintage audio, look at the subscriptions to that subreddit, and you can see a big uptick starting in about 2020. There was steady, predictable growth from the founding of that subreddit in 2012 all the way through 2020. And then it seems like the pandemic hit and bam, that subreddit just exploded in a way that you didn't necessarily see with other audio related subreddits. So you're a vintage audio retailer. Have you seen a similar explosion of interest since the pandemic hit, or is that maybe just an online phenomenon?
No, it's both, both online and through the store itself, through our actual sales. One customer actually pointed it out to me very clearly. They said that when you walk into stores, and I'm not going to name any right now, but when you walk into big box stores and you look at the different manufacturers, whether they be Denon, Marantz, Pioneer, Onkyo, what have you, you really have to look hard because they're pretty much cookie cutter. They're all the same. Whereas if you look at the older type of equipment, a cursory glance, and you can tell immediately what brand name it is because they're so distinctive.
And so, how'd you make the transition from you were like a home theater dealer, more or less, right? And then you transitioned into vintage audio.
Correct. So what happened was is that in the early, well, through even before that, in the early 2000s, as when Innovative Audio actually formed, but way before that, I went to garage sales, flea markets, you know, finding all this stuff because I had an absolute passion for it. It's always been one of those things that, bringing home a whole carload of receivers and whatnot, and you paid like $50 was outstanding. It was amazing. But we were doing this in essence home theater throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. As I said, in 2000, Innovative Audio was actually born. We got the store going because we were doing for 5 years. We were broadcasting for the Vancouver Giants. And in 2005, we opened the store up, and we were doing whole house audio, video integration systems. We were doing some repairs. But the odd thing was, with regards to our sales and whatnot for new equipment, we did something completely different, which is we took in trades, which was, again, nobody else was doing it. And we were finding the type of gear coming in was fantastic. It was easy to repair. It was just phenomenal equipment. And within a couple of years, in 2007, we made the decision of getting rid of the entire home theater gambit altogether and switching primarily just to 2-channel audio. Once we did that, we've never looked back. It was probably one of the best decisions we ever could have made.
So you talked about how when you were doing the home theater business, you would accept trade-ins, but now that you've moved away from that and you're primarily selling vintage gear, like how do you get the gear? Does someone call you and say, "Hey, I've got a Sansui 9090. How much will you pay me for it?" Or like, do you crawl eBay? Do you look on Audio Gun? Like, how do you get your hands on this stuff?
So that's a fair question. So unfortunately, eBay seems to be the high watermark with a lot of retailers and what have you. We do not go to eBay. What happens is that we take a look at other devices that we had. First off, we never give prices over the phone because we don't know. Somebody's idea of mint condition means it only has 7 cigarette burns in the case instead of 3. And so we are very cautious when it comes to giving any sort of value over the phone. We want to make sure it's in our shop, on our table or bench. We want to test it. We want to go through it. Once we know exactly what we're dealing with, then at that time, we will give the absolute best value based upon prior sales of what we had before. Now, the biggest thing being is, again, we're one of the very few companies that actually put our products on a website. So we take pictures, what have you, and we put it up. So if somebody comes in and we tell them, "Hey, you've got a 9090 DB, it's in great shape, it's going to be this," we're going to put it on our floor approximately, let's say, $1,200. And the thing is, after we go through it, after we fix it, because everything we put on our floor comes with a full warranty, and the customer goes online days, weeks, whatever later, and they see that exact unit going for $1,299. They know that we're not fleecing them. They're not sitting there looking at it and all of a sudden it's $3,000.
Gordon, what are the really hot kinds of components in vintage audio right now that people are buying?
Turntables are still the number one. Amplifiers seem to have taken a real huge drop in the last long while. The forerunners, like the big boys, like Bryston's, McIntosh, Mark Levinson's, what have you, for whatever reason, they've really dropped in popularity.
Huh.
Turntables, receivers, oddly enough, really good high-end CD players, if you can find them, are still in demand. And the really weird thing, which we don't, anytime we get them in, they fly off the shelf, are mini discs. So
What?
if you mini
Huh?
discs, mini disc players, mini disc recorders, it's for whatever, I have no idea why, but they seem to be an exceedingly popular item.
Wow.
Wow.
Can you even get mini discs anymore? Like blank ones to record on?
Purportedly, you can. From what I understand, I think Amazon, you can get some on Amazon. I don't know. I don't want to be, I have to verify that. There are a number of media companies that still have mini discs in backstock. So it is still a fairly popular
Wow.
media.
Wow. One other thing that I've noticed, and you can tell me if this tracks with your experience or not, in the online domain, and this is on Reddit, this is on YouTube, what have you, I'm surprisingly seeing a lot of younger people than I would expect. I can understand for a guy like me, grew up in the 70s and 80s going, man, I always wanted that Kenwood KA5002, like, and now I can get one, you know what I mean? But like, I'm seeing 20 something year old kids getting into vintage audio. Does that track with your experience? And do you have any insight as to maybe why?
Insight, I can only guess because I don't really know. I think that the allure is, in some cases, they've seen that this is what their parents had, and especially when they're going into smaller domiciles, or sorry, they're going into smaller buildings and such like that. When they're moving out, they don't have a lot of room for a lot of different things, but they they want to have that nostalgia feel. They want to have that sort of that atmosphere, and by having a piece of gear, I've actually sold a number of pieces to younger people. They didn't even want to plug it in. They just want to have it sitting there so it looks really
Wow.
good. So
Interesting.
it's kind of an odd thing. There are, on the backside of that, there are a number of people that we have spoken with that are, sub 30, and they are exceedingly knowledgeable when it comes to the equipment itself. They've taken the time to do the background, the research, and what have you, and it's really interesting talking to them because they give an insight that you knew was there, 20, 30 years ago, sometimes even 40. But now you're hearing it coming back again through the eyes and ears and what have you from these people that, for the most part, could be your kids.
So, Gord, are there like pros and cons of buying vintage versus new gear?
One of the biggest things that we found, Brent, was first off, you can repair old gear and without having too much difficulty. Parts and pieces are pretty much off the shelf for the most part. Whereas new equipment, and we all heard about the Onkyo fiasco, um, simply just has too many meltdowns. It's not reliable. When you go buy a home theater receiver now, and again, in your experience, you've probably already seen this. Um, you can go to spend $2, $3, $4,000 on it, and it only has between a 2 and 4 year lifespan before it's either one broken or two completely outdated. So with home theater equipment, as you know, I have a 1978 receiver, still going strong. I've never had an issue with it.
Wow.
It's my mainstay. I haven't swapped it out, haven't done anything else, and every day I plug it in or every day I turn it on, it just works.
And what is the receiver? Can you give us the model name and the model number and the brand?
Well, actually, it's a Pioneer SX 1980.
Oh,
Um,
I know that one.
yeah, you used that one actually in your shootout that
Oh,
you
that's
did.
right. That's right. We did so on Gordon's site on vintageaudio.ca. I've actually gone up to his store and done some shootouts where we tested some vintage turntables versus some new ones and vintage amplifiers versus new ones. And this Pioneer receiver that he's got just really walked all over a lot of newer receivers. Now, if you pop the top on the thing, it looks like a Bryston on the inside. It's got like this big giant toroidal transformer in there and lots of output devices. It's really, really, really well built. And it was a super high end receiver for its day. But I mean, I put it up against anything anybody's making nowadays.
No, it's when you figure we measured it well, actually, sorry, Pioneer measured it at 270 watts at what was it, 0.05% THD.
Yeah.
You put it on your, I believe it was the Precision Audio device,
Yeah. Audio Precision. Yeah.
and It walked up about 471 at, I think it was 1% or just under 1%.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was just something crazy. Yeah, it was.
That raises an
underrated.
Interesting question for me. Is there, Gordon, in your experience, is there sort of a time span in which you think audio got good? Like, would there be a general date would you would say to someone, don't buy a stereo receiver before whatever year? And do you think it peaked in a certain year?
Open-ended question, because there's a number of variables. One of the ones being is that especially with customers and clients, you have to take into account what they're willing to spend. If money is no object, 1975 to 1980 was the golden years.
Why?
What happened was is that in, I believe it was 74, 75, Pioneer introduced a receiver called the SX1010, which was the very first receiver to actually break the 100 watt per channel mark. It was kind of sort of the Chuck Yeager device of its time. That was the start of the so-called power wars for the receivers. With the ones being like the Sansui G33000 being 300 plus watts per channel, the Techniques being 300 watts. The Marantz with the 25 and 2600s. These were huge power receivers. But before 75, and again, it has to be very careful because they did change the power ratings. So before 75, the 100 watt per channel it was like pie in the sky. It was the Mach 1 barrier. So there are a lot of really good pieces pre 1975. The Sansui, I believe it is the 5000X or the 8000, or the Stereo 8, was a phenomenal receiver. It was referred to as the engineer's receiver. Now, I may have that wrong because I don't have that in front of me right now, but Sansui made a lot of really good lower end, like between 70 and 75, there was still a lot of really great receivers coming out, but nothing that, again, 75 is when everything changed.
Very cool. Is there anything people might need to know about the connectivity of these older stereo receivers if they're going to get into this?
That's the really cool thing. You can, because they have auxiliary ports and what have you, you can pretty much plug everything and anything into it. The only thing they cannot accept is digital. So if you happen to have an optical, Toslink, or coaxial, you're going to need a converter to put it into the auxiliary. But aside from that, you can pretty much put anything into these old receivers as long as it has the inputs for it.
So, Gordon, I got one more question for you. What's the dividing line between vintage and non-vintage? Because I have like a 7-year-old UE Bluetooth speaker that I really like, and they no longer make it. And would that be considered vintage?
Once home theater came into the fray in the early 90s, that was pretty much the dividing line, because once you separate two-channel to home theater systems, they consider anything before home theater technically vintage audio. So if it's a two-channel vintage audio component before home theater, that is considered true vintage audio.
And so there's no such thing as a vintage Bluetooth speaker yet?
Not as yet, but I'm quite sure the millennials will be flocking to that if there is.
So we're going to wrap it up. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us. And I should say that if you want to check out what Gordon does, go to vintageaudio.ca. They are based in Vancouver, British Columbia, but you do business all over the world, right?
We get stuff shipped to us virtually from all over the world to repair, because we have, without sounding, arrogant, egotistical, or blatant, we have pretty much the best service facility anywhere noted.
Okay, well, Gord, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been a treat having your expertise and wisdom on a subject that Dennis and I really don't know anything about.
I truly appreciated being here, guys, and I really wish that I could have gone into more detail with a lot of different things, because it is a fascinating area, and one that is truly rewarding, no matter which way no matter how much money you put into it or not. It is really something that everybody should take a look into at least one time or another.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Gord. Well, we're going to take a little break. And when we're back, Brent, I want to talk to you about this phenomenon that you're writing about, ChiFi headphones. So
Cool.
we'll
My
see you guys
new
on the other
favorite topic, vintage ChiFi headphones.
side. That's not a thing yet.
Yet.
So, all right. We'll see you soon. And welcome back to the Soundstage Audiophile Podcast. I'm Dennis Berger.
And I am Brent Butterworth.
And in this segment, I want to talk about some recent earphone reviews you've been doing, Brent,
Mhm.
because there seems to be a trend happening over at Soundstage Solo.
A
You've
bit.
been reviewing a lot of earphones, in-ear monitors, whatever you want to call them,
Mhm.
and a certain phrase keeps popping up again and again in these reviews.
Yeah.
The phrase is ChiFi.
Mhm.
And I'm not a big headphone guy. I'm especially not an earphone guy. I can't really do earphones that much. So I'm a little ignorant about this, but I wanted to pick your brain about it, about this phenomenon, about this trend, about these brands, and sort of try to understand, like, why are you reviewing all of these products that you're grouping together under this heading of ChiFi? What is this thing, and why is it so popular right now? So
Okay.
I guess we'll start with the term, because I have to admit, as a white dude living in Montgomery, Alabama, I kind of feel a little bit racist just saying ChiFi. To me, that sounds derogatory. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Okay, so it means, Chinese hi-fi.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that the term was originally coined by white American dudes on some audio forum.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's existed for at least 10 years, and it was originally applied to inexpensive amplifiers, mostly tube amps, because a lot of Chinese companies came out with, like Dakin is one of them. There are several others came out with tube amplifiers that were priced at, say, $500, whereas you would find them under American brands for $3,000 for a fairly similar product.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously a lot of enthusiasts started going, well, $500, I'll buy one of these. And it got the name ChiFi because they were sold under these Chinese brands that were at the time unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
And however, in the last, that stuff's still out there. You can go on Amazon and look for, Google tube amplifiers. You'll find this stuff fast.
I wrote an article about it last year. I just didn't know they were called ChiFi, I guess.
Yeah. So, but the term has come to refer a lot more to these earphones that are, now they're very inexpensive. They tend to be under $100. There are some that are $200, $300, something like that. But there are a lot of them that are in, the mid two digits, like, $50 or even as low as like $20. And this is not, if you were to go buy a $20 set of earphones from, say, Sony, okay, they would have a single dynamic driver and they'd be these cheap little plastic things. But you go buy these ChiFi earphones from brands such as, say, Tin Hi-Fi or CCA or KZ, and they will have 2 or 3 drivers in them. They'll have over-the-ear cable routing, which, serious earphone listeners prefer because it kind of gives you first of all, the cables aren't hanging out of your ears or hanging over your ears, so it's strain relief. Second of all, that design allows the earphone to fit deeper into your ear and give you a better seal and a better fit.
Well, these CCAs look a lot like my Westtones, man. I mean,
they're modeled on those kind of earphones. And in fact, these companies have made a lot of the higher end product for big brands that you have heard of.
Mhm.
Because it's been no secret that almost all headphones and earphones have been made in China for probably the last 15, 20 years. And some brands accept it, certainly like Audeze and Campfire Audio and people like that still make all their products in the US, but the vast majority of mass market headphones are all made in Chinese factories. And so what has happened, though, is that some of these companies have come out under their own brand, and some of them have multiple brands that they sell under.
Mhm.
And the brand names are usually a little wacky. Like one of these is called it's the Nice HCK, and that's all one word, DB3 earphones. And I pronounce it nice.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that's racist.
No, it's not racist. It's just like
Just joking.
HCK. What is HCK? There's no vowel in there. So that's kind of what you would say. So is it nice hack? Is it nice hook? Is it nice Is it nice HCK? I don't know. Maybe they should have a thing on their website, but whatever.
Right.
So, but what you'll find in these things is a lot of them have, with high-end earphones, most of them have multiple drivers. So they'll have maybe 5 drivers in there, maybe 3, sometimes as many as 10. And with most of these things, you'll have a dynamic driver for the bass, which is a good thing because those do a good job on bass. And you'll have balanced armatures for the higher frequencies. And you'll use like 2 balanced armatures for the mid-range and 2 for the treble or whatever. But these things are coming out at prices. The CCA C10 typically runs around $40, and there are 5 drivers per side.
Yeah.
And I tested them. You can go to soundstagesolo.com and start poking around. Look under. We have some drop-down menus where you can look for specific reviews on earphones, and there's a bunch of these things in there. And the most recent one was a 10 Hi-Fi T3 Plus, which is a little more expensive. I think they were about $70. And those have a single dynamic driver, but there are sort of high-end ways to do a single dynamic driver. We've seen single dynamic driver earphones from, say, Techniques that are $1,200. And boy, they are fantastically good. And these are kind of scratching up against those, but they're at a tiny fraction of the price. And it's a really fine product.
Well, I'm looking at your measurements. I mean, these things have obviously been voiced. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no denying they put a lot of care and attention into the voicing of these things. So,
yeah, and they're not out of bounds from. I have to say, if you rounded up a bunch of earphones from, if you went to Target, let's say, and Walmart and places like that, and rounded up all the cheap $10 earphones, $20 earphones, $30 earphones from Sony and Skullcandy, and Philips is actually a big brand, all those different sort of mainstream companies, and you ran measurements on them, they would probably not be as close to, say, Harman Curve as a lot of these things are. I mean, none of these, I've done 4 of these earphones in the last 6 months, and none of them were wacky. They were all, they're not perfect. They all have little flaws here and there, but they're all really good products. And these nice hook, whatever, DB3s are, I think they were $18 when I bought them. And truth be told, the reason I got into this is I ran out of review samples. And I wasn't able to get anything in time for review, so I bought a bunch of these things real cheap. Just
you're
for
telling
kicks.
on yourself.
Yeah, but it turned out to be a really worthy area of exploration, because to me, this really revives. We've talked many times about how high-end audio has gotten so far out of reach for any kind of average person. When you've got amplifiers selling for $10,000, $20,000, $100,000, you've got these giant speakers that are just way out there for most people, and also are $50,000 or $100,000. And yeah, there's still plenty of high-end product you can go buy for hundreds of dollars, but the focus so much when you go on to the shows now is on this super, super expensive product. And to see these companies coming in for $50 or something and offering a really fine product that I mean, and the fit on these things is for the most part really good. And to be able to spend $50, and also these things are all efficient enough to where you can just plug them straight into your smartphone or into a smartphone dongle or whatever you have. And they sound great. And you can really start to explore high quality audio for 30, 40, $50.
Wow,
and that's an incredible thing to me.
I'm looking at your measurements of the KZX Critical CRN now. And I mean, just looking at the spectral decay, they obviously put a lot of thought into the casing for these things.
Yeah.
Like
you can't distinguish these things from $500 product except by the brand and the packaging.
Yeah. I mean, there's just like no significant resonances in this thing, which, I mean, that would have to be a really, I mean, you tell me, I'm just guessing that would have to be a really carefully designed casing, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not aware of any direct correlation between the spectral decay measurements and sound quality. It's just that they kind of point out, they're one of the things in measurements that sign up, you look at it and you go, hey, maybe they didn't put so much work into that.
Mhm.
But these are just really well-made products that are, so often we get like even high-end, really expensive earphones that are $1,000 that really don't fit very well. And
Mhm.
these things, all four of these that I reviewed fit me fine. Some of them better than others. The nice hook ones and the 10 hi-fi ones fit me, I would say, perfectly. And I had to get different tips for them, but I almost always have to do that anyway. But the tips I get are $20 for, I don't know, whatever number.
Yeah.
And I do that with, I would have to do that with $500 or $1,000 earphones probably too. So they don't come with a case, but you can go buy a case for $10 on Amazon with no problem or less. And you can also choose your case. So and they all have detachable cables. So you can hook them up to a true wireless, Bluetooth adapter if you want to run them that way.
Yeah.
They're really versatile, and it's they're really good products for crazy cheap. It's almost like if you could go buy a really good set of speakers, and I'm not just talking about a tolerable set of speakers, but a really good set of speakers for $200.
Mhm.
That to me is what these are like. And, there are $200 speakers I can tolerate, basically. There's not any really good ones, I guess, but there's some passable ones. These are good. These are really good products. Like I would say this is high-end sound for a really, really, really low price. And people should just go buy a couple of them. Part of audio, I mean, we're always talking about like, how do you get the best sound quality? But part of being an audiophile is also exploring different things.
Yeah.
And that can cost you a lot of money. If you want to go explore an R2R DAC, well, that might cost you $500 or $1,000.
Yeah.
But with this, you can go explore a couple of these things. You could buy 3 of them for $120 or less and have something to play with and really enjoy it. And I swear to God, if you get that, you're going to hear some things in your recordings that you haven't heard before. And because they're really good high-end earphones and they're just crazy cheap. Now, I don't know, as far as there isn't an issue here, and that's under what conditions are these things being produced? And you always have to wonder about that with some of this super, super cheap product is how can they sell it so cheap? And clearly they can't be paying people a lot of money. And, you wonder about things like, famously the Foxconn factory in Guangdong that had, nets around the edge of the building so that people wouldn't jump off the building and die. And so you kind of, but I gotta say, in almost everything we buy, there are these issues nowadays that you have to wonder about the food that we eat and the cars that we buy and the cell phones that we have and all this sort of stuff. So
I did an interview with Dan Loftman of Emotiva last year where we dug into a lot of that about, it's like, what is the moral aspect of of saving a few bucks when you're buying this gear. But I have a couple of other questions about this for you, since you explored it way more than I have. First things first, with in-ears, I can only really do balanced armatures for reasons that we won't dig into here, but and so it's really, really cool to me that I've always sort of been limited in what I could try out in terms of earphones, because for the most part, historically speaking, balanced armature earphones have been more expensive. So it's like, I find one that works, I keep it forever. This gives me more of an avenue to explore. But on the other hand, I'm an iPhone guy. I don't have a headphone jack anymore. I don't want the stupid dongle. Are there any of these that are true wireless? And are they anywhere near as affordable?
No, but you can get a true wireless adapter for them. So it's like a little thing. So instead of these cables have what's called a 2-pin connector. It's just 2 pins, and the replacement cables are commonly available for them. You can get replacement cables with a microphone built in or whatever you want. And so they also make KZ, which is one of the big companies that, KZ is the parent company of a lot of these ChiFi brands. And I should also add, the Chinese manufacturers embrace the term ChiFi. Like, they're really proud that they're getting recognized as Chinese manufacturers that are making really good product under their own name, rather than just companies that are cranking out other products, products that other companies designed.
Okay.
So, and with the Tin Hi-Fi review, Tin Hi-Fi actually posted a thing on Facebook and said, if you leave a comment, you'll be eligible to win a set of free earphones. So we got all kinds of comments because people kept just leaving a comment on there saying, "Oh yeah, these are awesome," and and we were sitting there wondering, like, why are we getting all this stuff? And then we finally figured out it was coming off of this Facebook page. So Tin Hi-Fi completely embraced this, and I never had any contact with them because I just bought the things because they were so cheap. So they seem to really to take a great deal of pride in it, and they should, because they're doing great stuff. This is designed by them, built in China. Quite often, these are shipped directly from China when you buy them. And I should point out that these are probably most readily available off of Amazon. But if you start poking around, you'll find, I want to say Alibaba sells some of them, and there's some other sites that sell them. And a lot of it is just drop shipped straight from China, and you get it. Weirdly, you get them in like a few days from China, which, like, how do they even do this?
But you've reviewed 4 of them recently, I think. The KZs, the CCAs,
which is made by KZ.
Nice hook. And the Tin Hi-Fi. Of the 4, which was your favorite, and like, what were the differences between them?
The Tin Hi-Fi was my favorite because it had, to me, and also in the measurements, I think the most neutral sound. And there were little things I didn't like about it, but there's little things I don't like about almost any earphones. And all of them were, sort of reasonably sane voicings. None of them sounded weird. I'll put it to you that way. They had varying degrees of treble emphasis. And I think that the Tin Hi-Fis had probably the least of that and kind of the most neutral sounding treble, which is weird because they have a single dynamic driver, but they had to do a lot of things rather than just shove a bunch of balanced armatures in there and tweak those up. They had to do all the tuning acoustically. So I think they had to put more care into it, kind of like when you're mastering vinyl, right? You have to, like anybody, you can kind of throw together a master for digital audio pretty quickly because your file will be perfectly reproduced on the other side. However, on vinyl, since vinyl has limits, vinyl, you can't really go above about 15 kilohertz once you start to get to inner grooves, and you have limits in terms of the bass excursion and things like that. So with vinyl records, they have to, the vinyl cannot reproduce an original digital signal in full fidelity. So the mastering engineer has to go in there and put a lot of care into making it sound good. You can't crank out a vinyl master and have it work. And my theory is that single dynamic driver earphones, it's the same thing. If you can slap a driver in there and it'll work. And the Skull Candy earphones for $20 or whatever sound decent. But to really get it good, you got to go in there and work at it. And that's my theory, is they just put more work into the tuning, and the result is fantastic. And I think these were $70, and they look fine, and they're comfortable, and I loved them, and I've been using them. And I would like it if they came out with a true wireless version that didn't require that you use adapters. And because, I have yet to try any of these adapters. They get very mixed reviews. They're kind of like true wireless from 5 years ago, where it was really dicey to get this stuff to work. Yeah. So I really should buy a set. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to buy a set and try them, and maybe I'll do a review of it and just see if I can find. Maybe I'll buy 3 of them and find if one of them works. And there's no reason they shouldn't. It's just a matter of them, putting the work in to make sure it does. But I think that would be really cool, because true wireless is the earphone market now.
Oh yeah. Well, you've done 4 of these. Have you got any more coming up?
I have a lot of schedule conflicts that are preventing me from going to headphone shows, so it's hard for me to find out what the latest and greatest stuff is out there. But I intend to go to whatever the next headphone show is, wherever it is, and dig in a little bit more. And also, there's other so-called ChiFi brands that I have not even encountered yet. I just did this because I was desperate for product. And then I found that this is a really cool thing, and I need to be digging into it. And I'm doing, a comprehensive set of measurements, which extremely few people do with headphones and earphones. A lot of people just measure the frequency response and leave it at that, but I'm doing a lot more than that, which you can see at soundstagesolo.com. I think let's do some credits. This will be edited by, we don't know who, either me or Dennis.
Probably me. Yeah. I think it's my turn.
I think it's, but I'm kind of digging doing it now. Now that I'm trying to come up to fever. I'm kind of trying to come up to your standards, so I'm having to learn some stuff and figure out all the plugins that you started using.
You taught me how to do it.
I know, but the master, or the student has become the master or whatever. Strike me down. And the music is probably going to be mostly by me this time, with potentially some help from my friend Ron Seiger. And we should credit the Soundstage Network, which is our parent company and overlord and benefactor. And you can dig into all of the 9 different microsites on Soundstage by just going to soundstage.com. Oh, we should credit
Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon for popping in here and lending us his expertise on vintage audio.
Yeah. What is his URL again?
vintageaudio.ca.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
There we go. That was easy.